I'm Janet Morena, Executive Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to Just Ask Janet. Well, there's a lot going on in the pro-life movement, and I am so honored that here at our Priest for Life headquarters, we've been joined by one of the great pro-life leaders in the nation. He and I have been friends for many, many years, and I'm so happy to welcome to our program today, Brad Manis of Life Issues and so welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on, Janet. Like you say, our friendship goes way back.
Way back.
It's always extra special when we spend time like this together.
Exactly. And with all the COVID nonsense behind us, right?
Right.
We're finally together again. So you and I go way back, but of course we both are standing on the shoulders of a couple that I know are very dear to your heart, but to mine also. Dr. Jack Wilkie and his wife, Barbara. They were in the very early days of the movement. And I know, I learned so much from them. But tell us about your relationship with the Wilkies.
Oh, wow. Well, my relationship with them goes back to 1975 when I was 18 and a senior in high school.
Wow.
And I was in a persuasive speech class. And it was the end of the year. It'll be 46 years this May.
Wow.
And I chose abortion. And we were largely graded on how we could persuade the class to whatever issue we were advocating.
Right.
So I picked abortion and I looked up Right to Life in the phone book. I was sent to this lady's house and she gave me these Wilkie slides and Wilkie pamphlets, and I didn't know who the Wilkies were. But I took all that and put together a presentation. I took a poll of the kids before. It was about 50-50.
I mean, who was in favor of abortion, who was against it?
Right.
Okay.
And then I showed them the Wilkie slides. I showed them the beauty of the unborn child. I showed them the ghastly reality of what abortion does to those children. And then we talked about the impact it has on women's physical and psychological well-being.
Right.
And then afterward, I took a poll again, and it was unanimous for life.
Wow.
Yes.
Incredible. So you were able to change half of those kids from thinking abortion was okay to being not okay, right?
Right.
Just by Dr. Wilkie. Now, let's talk a little bit about Dr. Wilkie, because he left a beautiful medical career, right, of delivering babies, right? He was an OBGYN, right?
Yes.
And when Roe v. Wade happened, I think he basically said, what do you mean? I'm delivering babies. They're going to be doctors are going to kill babies. Tell us about that whole transition.
Well, he had a practice that went on for a good portion of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then he started commuting back and forth from Cincinnati to DC while he was president of National Right to Life Committee. And he gave up his most highest income producing years as an OBGYN and physician. He was a family physician, heavy in OB. So he sacrificed immeasurably to advocate for the right to life. He and Barbara would go out on the road on weekends and come back, and then he would have his practice during the weekdays.
Wow.
So they were nonstop. And when I started traveling with them internationally, I could hardly keep up, literally, with them. And I thought, these are supposed to be old people that can't keep going. And God gave them the grace, the stamina, the wisdom, and the focus to be so effective well into their senior years.
Wow. And of course, Dr. Wilkie has had how many children and grandchildren?
6 kids, and 1 was adopted.
Wow.
So there are many grands and now several great grands.
Wow. And of course, the Wilkies sadly are no longer with us. They're with the Lord now. But before they are passing, they did, I can remember, I have to tell an honest story. They were visiting Father Pavone and I in our Priest for Life headquarters. I took them out to lunch, and all you had to do was ask them 1 or 2 questions, right? And the stories they would come out with about the early days of the movement and how things happened. And so I remember saying to them, you need to write this in a book because we all have to know the history. This is a history of the pro-life movement. When Roe v. Wade happened, like I've spoken before about Nellie Gray and those early marches for life, they thought they were going to have one march for life. Because they thought when they told everyone they're killing babies, it was just going to stop. But it didn't, right? So tell us about the Wilkies there and how they then came to write that book.
Well, I appreciate your talking to them and asking them to write a book because we had been doing that for years. And his answer was always, we're too busy making history to write it down in a book. So finally, as they saw their years waning, understanding their time on earth was limited.
Right.
Then they got serious about writing the book. And for about 5 years, that was a project of putting everything in, pulling together thousands and thousands of pieces of information, checking and rechecking. It was a monumental task.
Right.
But now exists, we call it an inside view, the history of the pro-life movement. And it goes year by year. And
Wow.
then for each year, it details the key events that took place, not just with the Wilkies, but in every aspect. The point at which Priests for Life began is in there. And
Right.
he talks about an initial meeting that he and I had with Father Pavone in Cincinnati,
Wow.
where he came to Jack and said, you know, do you think this is a good idea? Would I have your support? And both Jack and I were very excited
Yeah.
when he talked about that. And Jack was able to give him considerable boost. And you know, when you have Jack's and Barbara's endorsement, that's like the good housekeeping seal of approval. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us again, the name of the book is?
Let me see if I can remember it. It's been a while since I looked at it. An Inside View, the History of the Pro-Life Movement.
And it's available on Amazon.
Right,
Yeah.
right. They can order it there. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful history of the movement up to the point of the Wilkies ending their activity.
Right. And now you're president of Life Issues Institute. You've been in that position for how many years now, Brad?
Oh, it's hard to tell. I would say I took over the radio program from Jack in 2003.
Wow.
And I think I purposely did not take the title of president until after Jack's death.
Right.
So that was 2015.
Yeah.
Because I always wanted to encourage him to be as active as he could, as late in life as he could. He was like a father to me. Both of them were like parents.
Yeah.
I dearly loved them, and I wanted them around. So I said, Jack, you're going to die with your boots on, and we want to help facilitate that.
Yeah.
And that's basically what he did. He was getting his breakfast ready one morning when his heart, which he took medication for many decades, just gave out.
Wow.
And he peacefully went to be with the Lord.
Yeah.
And his Barbara, there were 2 years between her death in 2013 and his in 2015. And he pined for the day when he would see her.
Yeah.
And on one of the last times I saw him, I said, you know, God's got a reunion with you and Barbara on his calendar. You just don't know what the date is. You can't see it, that circled date. And he smiled, and that gave him some comfort, that knowing that time would come.
Right. Well, and you know, so many people were educated on the life issue and abortion because of the Wilkies.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
And I know, I can remember when Father Frank was my parish priest, one of the very first books we ordered for our parish pro-life library was their questions and answers, that little handbook. I still have it here in my library here. And it's a wealth of information. It really is. So we owe so much to them, who kind of helped steer the ship in those early days of getting us going.
I can't begin to tell you, Janet, how many people have come up to me over the years and said, the Wilkies are the reason I'm in the movement.
Right.
Or I was pro-abortion and changed my mind because of what they said and did.
Yeah, it's amazing. So now tell us about current today, Life Issues Institute. What are you up to? What are your latest projects or initiatives, and what are you doing?
Well, we do a daily radio commentary. We're on over 1,270 radio stations.
Wow.
We reach 18 million people a week. I do a half-hour radio special every January 22nd. We had 813 radio stations donate a half hour of airtime.
Wow.
In a highly competitive market, and several of them aired at multiple times. So what we're doing between now and when the court rules on the Dobbs case is a very strategic, well thought out plan. So many people are focused on the abortion issue because there's an anticipation that the Supreme Court may reverse Roe v. Wade or dramatically impact its effect.
Right.
So millions are kind of watching and seeing what's going to happen. And so we are doing a couple of radio specials where we are doing time buys on secular stations in major metropolitan areas.
Right. And just so people know what we're referring to is we're referring to the the Dobbs case, which is the challenge to the Mississippi Gestational Age Act, which of course the pro-aborts have challenged and has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. And we feel, and a lot of the pro-life attorneys in the groups we know feel that this is the first time we have a real shot at really chipping away at Roe and turning it back to the states, which is where abortion was before Roe, right?
Right. And I call it the Dobbs late-term abortion case because it would end abortion at 15 weeks.
Right.
So what we're doing is everything that we're doing publicly is focusing on well-researched, polled sound bites that will change hearts and minds.
Yeah.
And the first radio special to air in late April is The Faces of Roe, Men and Women Impacted by Abortion. And I'm interviewing a woman and a man who have experienced late-term abortion. And their stories are very, very dramatic. Stories that would have not have been written had states been able to curtail and limit late-term abortion.
That's right.
And then we're going to talk to people who are in the trenches helping women and men with unexpected pregnancies, both during pregnancy and well after, to assist them, to mentor them, to equip them to be productive, independent citizens.
Well, and just recently, I read one of your newsletter things you send out because we just had the Super Bowl, and I have to say, my condolences, Brad. You're a Cincinnati boy, and those Bengals didn't pull it off, but the LA Rams did. But you did a very interesting story about one of the players. Tell our viewers about that.
Yes, and the story originated in Ohio, ironically, and most of it happened and unfolded there. A woman named Tanisha Copeland was unexpectedly pregnant, and she was facing intense pressure to abort, so much so that it put her into a clinical depression, and she was admitted to the hospital. When she was gotten out, discharged from the hospital, she went right to a maternity home, Open Doors Ministry maternity home in Euclid, Ohio. And there she flourished in a nurturing environment and became very close to the Lord and depended upon him for her decisions in life. And she had a little son. His name is Marquise, and he grew up to be a fine young man. He attended, of all places, the University of Cincinnati. Ironically, then he played Cincinnati in the Super Bowl, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So he went to the University of Cincinnati, and he picked that college because he wanted it to be close enough where his mother could drive and watch to the games and watch them. Yeah. I mean, the mother-son bond was very, very strong from early on, and they took care of one another. Yeah. And he went on then to play football, had a full scholarship at the University of Cincinnati. And then that gave way to the NFL, where he became a player with the Los Angeles Rams. And number 93 played in the Super Bowl. Right. And number 93, an unplanned baby who everybody thought was not worth allowing to live, was a life not worth living. He will now wear a Super Bowl ring on his hand. Yeah. And he's made his mother very, very proud.
And, see, that story too, Brad, really points out what we know from the testimonies of the women from Silent No More and all these other abortion recovery groups, that most of these women are not freely choosing abortion. Like, look at his mom. She was being forced, pressured, coerced, so much so that it caused her to be hospitalized in a clinical depression. She wanted her baby. And yet all the family and friends around her were really pushing her down the abortion road, right?
Right. And you and I have both talked to countless women and men who, especially the women where they felt they were pressured or coerced or even downright forced to have that abortion. Research shows about 60 to 70% expressed that they felt pressured or coerced into having the abortion.
Right. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I love stories like that. I mean, very often a lot of people hear about Tim Tebow. You know, that's a big famous story, and his mom, who also same thing was abortion was considered. But this is a new story, which I'm so excited about, especially like you said that he has a Super Bowl ring now, and you know, it comes down to that phrase where people say like, "Oh, it's a potential life." No, abortion kills a child that has great potential, and we don't know what the potential of that child would be.
Well, God has a plan for every child conceived.
Right,
His plan existed before that child was conceived.
right.
And what we have to do is open our hearts and minds to those pregnancies, knowing that God has a plan. And our role is to assist them and nurture them in any way we can.
That's right. And then I know you did some TV work for a while, right?
Yes.
And I think you've even won some awards. Tell us about that.
Well, we did for 8 seasons a half-hour weekly TV program called Facing Life Head On. And my goal as host and executive producer was to stay out of the way of some very moving stories. Women who experienced late-term abortion. We did embryo adoption. We have done several programs on individuals with Down syndrome because that's an issue I feel very passionate about. And through that programming, my guests were able to share their stories of how they faced difficult life situations and chose life and were blessed, or some that chose death and paid some heavy consequences.
Right.
And our goal was to reach women in childbearing age that weren't necessarily with us on abortion. And as a result of our emails and letters and things, we hit a good market. And we feel that we probably changed the minds of a lot of women. We know we have from some of the mail we received. But the program garnered 3 regional Emmy Awards for pro-life programming, which was unheard of.
Right.
When we got the first one, some of my colleagues didn't quite say it, but I could tell they thought, well, that was a mistake. You were just lucky you slipped one through. And then when we got the second one,
They
they thought,
no mistake.
maybe you have something here. And then when we picked up the third one, they thought, yeah, this is a winning combination. And that, I think that's what a lot of us are doing in the movement is
Right.
we're making pro-life relevant and acceptable in mainstream America.
Yeah.
And we have all the arguments with us. This Marquise Copeland is a wonderful example of why life is winning.
That's right. And of course, as you know, you and I both do a lot. I with Silent No More, Rachel's Vineyard, but you've also had a real heart for reaching out to men who, in particular, who've been hurt from abortion. Tell us a little bit about that journey. Like, what got you? I mean, because you have no abortion experience, let's make that clear, but yet you have a real passion for reaching out and helping men. Tell us about that.
Well, we were beginning to get letters to Dr. Wilkie from men who were really grieving, just seriously wounded by the abortion. And then a letter came in to my attention. It was a handwritten letter, talked from a man whose brother had experienced 2 abortions against his will. And he chose to end his life. And his mother found him hanging in the garage. And it was a very gruesome visual thing to see. They'll never forget that. But when he sent me that letter, I was determined that this young man did not die in vain, and that we would build on the tragedy that he experienced. And so then I told Jack, we're missing something in the equation here. We know about women, but we're missing the men piece.
Right.
And I said, I need to go out there and do some research. And he really encouraged me to do so. So I found little islands of areas where people were addressing men and abortion. And we started to communicate. And I said, we really need to coalesce to a loose coalition where everybody maintains their independence, but we assist one another. And in, I think, 2005 is when we had our first in-person gathering. To make it official, we call ourselves the Men and Abortion Network,
Right.
or MAN.
Man.
We have a website, menandabortion.net, NET. that's exclusively for grieving fathers and those who want to help them.
Right.
So our goal back then was to create awareness and then provide resources so that we could get these men the help they need.
Right.
And I'll tell you, it was so encouraging, Janet, the response we got from the pro-life service, and as we call them, the pro-life pregnancy centers, they all opened this concept with open arms,
Right.
understanding that men need compassion too.
Yeah.
And that really helped us mushroom that awareness from just little islands to the whole United States.
Well, and I can remember, Georgette and I established, planned on, and we created Silent No More in 2002. We held our events in 2003. Our first man came forward to give testimony. I regret lost fatherhood in 2004. So you see how the Holy Spirit was working. And then I know once we did that, Rachel's Vineyard suddenly was getting men were coming on retreats. And then here in 2005, you established the Man Network. So it was like a need that was just out there waiting to be tapped into.
It just came bubbling up. Yes.
Yeah.
And I often put myself, a father of 4 sons, in the shoes of these hurting men, and how grieved I would be if my child was killed and there was nothing I could do legally to stop it. And my heart really went out to men. It continues to go out to men and women who struggle after the abortion.
And with the dads too, there's 2 sides of the coin. First of all, there's the men that wanted their wife or girlfriend to have that baby, but because of the abortion laws, they have no rights whatsoever. And so they couldn't stop her from having the abortion. But then there's the men who told her, either you have that abortion or I'm out of here. Or they literally forced them into the abortion, or a father taking a daughter. We've seen all these circumstances. So with the men, there's a 2-sided coin of the grief here, which is compounds it even more.
And I think those men who coerced abortions, who then have come full circle, are those that perhaps grieve the hardest.
Yes.
Because they understand that they abdicated their role as provider and protector. That God made us men to be.
Right.
And they really grieve that they did not step up to the plate.
Yeah. I mean, they were supposed to do, it's kind of like what Adam did to Eve in the garden, right? He kind of left her alone with the serpent and he didn't protect her. They were like the Adam that didn't protect their wife and their own child, so there's a very deep compounded grief there. There really is.
And when I do counseling of fathers, take them through that process, I like to do it one-on-one if I can. Right. But you see a man change so dramatically inside and out when he understands that the blood of Christ covers every sin, including the sin of abortion, and that there's hope and healing. And that's why churches are so important, Janet, because if they talk about forgiveness from divorce and drugs and various things, but never mention abortion, those people are coming to us and they're saying the message to them is that there is no forgiveness because my sin of abortion is so grievous. And Satan's been whispering that in their ears.
That's right.
God hates you.
It's
he doesn't
the
want you.
unforgivable sin.
Yes,
and what we're here to say is no. There is no sin with the Lord that's unforgivable, even abortion. And what I find, Brad, when especially when the men and women speak out from Silent No More, well, especially if they can give that testimony in a church, people could be sitting there committing all kinds of other sins, and they hear that and they said, well, wait, God forgave them from killing their own child, then God can forgive me of fill in the blank. And that's why it's such a redemptive message, these testimonies. Don't you find that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we need more men and women to come forward and talk about their pain, because they can reach the heart of somebody contemplating abortion in a way that we never can.
That's right.
Because you can't talk away or argue away their hurt. It's there and it's real. Right.
And especially with the men, they might have had that abortion when they were in high school or college, with their girlfriend, not thinking no big deal back then. And then, of course, years later, they marry and now they're in love and they have a family and everyone's congratulating them. Oh, you're having a baby for the first time. It hits them, doesn't it?
Right. Or when they're there and they see that sonogram
Yes, for
and
the first
they
time.
see that little beating heart and those little fingers and toes and
they
that cute little nose.
and they realize,
Yeah.
that's the baby I allowed to die.
Yeah.
And I'm responsible. So we know it happens. And our message is that there's hope and healing out there, you know?
Absolutely.
Well, Brad, this has been a great discussion. And I know we're here now in Florida. We're going to have some great meetings with other pro-life leaders. And just one final question. People ask us this all the time. Why are there so many pro-life groups, Brad? Huh?
Well, there are, and I'm glad there are,
Right.
because each group has a constituency that they reach.
Mhm.
Priests for Life
Right.
is a priest and Catholic laity.
Right.
Those different groups reach so many facets of society.
Right.
What's important is that we work together, we exchange knowledge, we share resources, collaboration,
right.
and that's what we're doing now for a few days.
It's like we have branches of the movement. There's
Yeah.
those who work on the legal, right? Those who work on legislative, those who work on abortion recovery, those who work on just education, and then of course those who are the pregnancy resource centers.
And the political realm,
Right.
Research analysis, Dr. Michael New has analyzed pro-life legislation and its impact on abortion.
Right.
And he frequently says that we are winning this. Since 1980, half the women have abortions that used to. And he said the reason for that, the main reason for that, is because of pro-life education, because of political passing laws, and for those women-centered centers and help places that will provide them and equip them to say yes to life.
That's right. And we are outnumbering the abortion clinics, I think now almost 4-1. So it's great news.
Yes, it is.
Well, thanks for joining me today, Brad. It was a pleasure having you, as always. And people need to get to your website, Life Issues Institute.
It's lifeissues.org,
lifeissues.org.
And for those men, it's meninabortion.net.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks for joining me. Well, brothers and sisters, thank you too for joining me on Just Ask Janet. And as we go, if you know someone who's hurting from abortion, just go to abortionforgiveness.com, put in your zip code, and you will see where the nearest health resources are for you there. And remember, brothers and sisters, you have to be out there and speak out, because there are some abortions only you can stop and some lives only you can save. Join me again next time on Just Ask Janet. Thank you.